Hello, hello, dear students. This is your teacher, Miss Pallavi, signing in to explain a non-fiction drama um, which is written by Michael Mupogo. In this story, we have four distinct characters. All right, the first one is a narrator who is a shopkeeper in a junk shop, and he finds an age-old, damaged oak wooden desk, right? The next one is Jim McPherson, who was a soldier, okay, and he wrote a letter to his wife while he was fighting a war between England and Germany in year 1915. Okay, so the narrator or the writer who is telling us the story, he is much younger than that person. Okay, and Jim McPherson was from England. And the third character that we have is Connie McPherson, who is also called Mrs. McPherson, and she was the wife of Jim McPherson. And the third character that we have is Hans Wolf. Hans Wolf was a German soldier, and his name is mentioned here because he and Jim McPherson happened to become friends while they were on the war. Okay, now let's see what is there inside this chapter. So in the first paragraph, you would see that the narrator goes to a junk shop in Bridport. So this man lives in Bridport, and this is the same place where Connie and Jim McPherson also used to live. Okay, so this man, he goes to a junk shop and buys an old roll-top desk, which was damaged very badly. Okay, and it was in a very bad condition, and there was scotch marks all around the table, but nevertheless he buys it because he thought that he would be able to restore it. So he, on the Christmas Eve, he starts working on the table to repair it. He removes the roll top completely, and then he pulls out all the drawers. The veneer, which means a thin layer of plastic or decorative wooden on furniture of cheap wood. So he removes it completely, and then he sees that this rolled up desk was severely damaged by both fire and water. So he tries to analyze what exactly had happened to this table, right? But as soon as he sees a drawer, he stops right there. He forces open the drawer, and then he sees a sellotaped box, a tin box. Okay, and he finds a box inside the drawer, and on that tin box he sees something written on it. It says Jim's last letter, received January 25th, 1915, to be buried with me when time comes. So he wonders who had written it, and when he opens that tin box, he finds a letter in it. Okay, so when he first was not sure if he should read the letter or not, but nevertheless, scruples means when you get the feeling of doing something wrong, although you are hesitating to do it. So he gives up and he surrenders to his scruples, and then he reads the letter. The letter was written from Jim to his wife, Connie. Okay, and where was he at that time? He was at the battlefield. Okay, what did the author find in a junk shop? So he found a table, an old roll-top desk. And what did he find in a secret drawer? It was a letter. And who do you think had put it in there? Of course, the desk belonged to Connie. Okay, and Jim was at war, So definitely it was Connie who must have put it. And since it is written that it should be put in her grave when she dies, it's most probably by Connie. It's it's Connie who had put it there. Okay, let's move on further. So what was written in the letter? When the narrator opens the letter, he sees that this letter was addressed to Connie, and it was written that I write to you in a much happier frame. So basically, in this whole letter, Jim is letting Connie know about a certain incident which happened at the battlefield when they used to live in trenches, which are long, deep ditches in the ground, and soldiers would hide from the enemy there. However, during the Christmas Eve in the battlefield, something very unusual happened. And what was that unusual thing which had happened? The enemy soldiers, who were the Germans, they were also called the Fritz. Okay, so they came up to the British soldiers. Now, the German soldiers used to call the British soldiers Tommy. So they came forward in a friendly gesture, and they wanted to celebrate Christmas with the British Army. That sounds very unusual, right? Because they are at the war, they're going to fight and kill each other. But just before the war, the German soldiers, they come up and then they invite the British soldiers to celebrate with them. So it's Christmas Day here, it is said. It is Christmas Day, Tommy. We have schnapps. So schnapps is a kind of drink, okay? And they also had sausages. So they were inviting that we have snaps and sausages. So why don't we just celebrate? Why can't we meet? And Jim McPherson was the captain of the British Army, of that troop that he was leading. And he did not find any reason to say no, so he says yes. And then a soldier from the German side introduced himself to Jim McPherson, and he says that he was Hans Wolf, and he was a cello player in his orchestra. Okay, and Jim also introduces himself, and he introduces himself as Captain Jim McPherson, and he said that he was a school teacher from Dorset, which is in England. Okay, so Dorset is in Bridport. Please remember that. Just like we have lanes and then street names and then city name and then state and then country, in the same way. So when he said, when Jim told Hans that he was from Dorset, Hans was very excited, and then he started talking about his own experiences. And he said that he loved to read, although he never went to Dorset, but he loved a lot of things about England, right? He used to read books written by English writers, and his favorite book was Far from the Madding Crowd. And then they also talk about their families. So Hans Wolf had a wife and a son who was born just 6 months ago. And they were talking about their interests and everything. And at the other end, the soldiers were having fun. They were smoking, they were laughing, talking, drinking, eating. And in the meantime, Hans Wolf and Jim McPherson, they started eating the leftover Christmas cake that Connie, Jim's wife, had made. Hans Wolf also tasted the Christmas cake, and he said that it was the best marzipan. So marzipan is basically a layer, a sweet covering on a cake made from sugar. Okay, so he said that it was the best marzipan that he ever tasted. So soon they had become very good friends. And then after they had talked for a long time, Jim McPherson and Hans Wolf, they expressed their point of view about war. And they said that, I think this is how we resolve this war. What does he mean? This is how we should resolve this war. He said that there should be a football match, No one dies in a football match. No children are orphaned. No wives become widows. And the British soldier Jim McPherson also, um, agreed with this idea. And there was just a little difference that instead of football, they were more interested in cricket. So he said, "Yes, I prefer cricket." I told him, then we Tommies could be sure of winning. Now they were playing a football match, and guess who won? The Germans won. Okay, and uh, why are we talking about this football match and everything and this war? Because everything that we are reading right now was written in that letter. Okay, and then after the football match was over, it was time for them to part. Okay, and then it was night time, and then both of these soldier parties, they exchanged Christmas carols. So the Germans sang Silent Night, okay, and the British Tommies, they sang While Shepherds Was Watched. It was Christmas time, so it's a tradition that during Christmas time they sing carols. And then he ends the letter by saying, "Dearest Connie, by Christmas next year, this war will be nothing but a distant and terrible memory. I know from all that had happened today how much both armies long for peace. See, wars happen not because the soldiers want it, or not because the soldiers like to fight wars, right? It's the hierarchy, the one who is sitting at the top, the people who sit at the topmost position, they are the ones who take the decision of war without realizing that how lives are devastated when wars are fight. So who had written the letter to whom and when? Jim had written the letter to Connie, and in 1915, when the British were fighting a war against Germany. When was the letter written? What was the wonderful thing that had happened? So the letter was written. Why was the letter written? The letter was written because the writer Jim wanted to share that how an unusual thing had happened in the battlefield. He wanted his wife to know that the German soldiers were not actually their personal enemies, and they had a very good time celebrating Christmas with each other. What jobs did Hans Wolf and Jim McPherson have when they were not soldiers? So Hans Wolf was a cello player in an orchestra. Jim McPherson was a school teacher in Dorset. Had Hans Wolf ever been to Dorset? Why did he say he knew it? He had never been to Dorset, but he always read books which were which were written by English writers, and he said that Thomas Hardy was his favorite, right? Was his favorite writer. It turned out that he had never set foot in Dorset, never even been to England. He had learned all he knew of England from school and from reading books in English. His favorite writer was Thomas Hardy. Okay. Do you think Jim McPherson came back from the war? And how do you know this? Well, it is very clear that Jim never came back from the war because that was the last letter that Connie had received, and she had saved that letter so dearly. She had preserved it so secretly, and she also wants this letter to go with her in her grave. That means that she doesn't have the person with her anymore. That is why she values the last thing that he gave her, that he sent to her. Now let's see what happens next in scene 3. So the narrator folds the letter and then he goes to Bridport to deliver this letter to Connie. See, you must understand that the writer here is a very sensitive man, and he understands the values of the emotions that this lady was going through. he understands that this was too old a letter for anyone to remember, to even remember. But this particular letter had something which made him believe that it's a very important a treasure which belonged to someone. So he went to his house and went to her house, and he tracked her down, and he found her in Burlington House, which is a nursing house. And her neighbor told the narrator that she was a lady, 101 years old now, and she doesn't live in that house anymore, which belonged to her and Jim, because the house caught fire. And he also tells the reason that it must be because of the candles, because apparently Mrs. Dorset, Mrs. Jim McPherson, she never got her electricity connection because she thought it was way too expensive. So why did the author go to Bridport? The author went to Bridport because he wanted to meet Connie and deliver the letter that meant so much to her. Okay. And how old was McPherson now? Mrs. McPherson, she was 101 years old, and she was in an old nursing home called Burlington Nursing House. I found Burlington Nursing House very easily. So the narrator, it was not difficult for him to locate the nursing home where she lived. Now, how did she react when she saw this man? The people in the shelter house told a little about Mrs. McPherson, that she was very old and she didn't have any friends. She was very lonely, and she never got any visitors. And they also assured that since somebody has come to see her today, she will be extremely, extremely happy. How did she look like? Her physical appearance is given here. She had silver white hair pinned into a wispy bun, and she was gazing out of the garden. Okay, when the narrator greeted her and when he said hello to her, she looked at his face. Okay, and because she was very old, so she couldn't hear him properly, and maybe as soon as she saw him, she was in a different world. Okay, she could only think of this man as her husband. Okay, so the narrator tried to explain to her that he had found this tin box which belonged to her, and he tried to tell her that how he found it, and he thought that it should be in her hands right now. But then suddenly he felt that she was not listening to him. She was only watching him, and when she saw that letter, her eyes were lit. She was so happy to see that letter, and she could instantly connect to that letter, that it belonged to her and it was very, very precious. So she then started speaking. She also gave him a kiss on his cheek, and she told him that she spoke to this narrator as her husband, and she said, "You told me you would come home by Christmas, dearest," she said. "And here you are, the best Christmas present in the world. Come closer, Jim dear, sit down." So she thinks that he is her husband, and she allows him to sit. And then she says that, "I read your letter so often, Jim, every day." So because she was 101 years old, so in her mind, she is saying that she used to read his letter every day, although the letter was not with her. And she told everything she was feeling. She wanted to hear his voice, and she always heard his voice in her head, and it made her feel that Jim was always with her. And then now suddenly she sees this man, and she is completely blown out, and she thinks that this was her husband. And then she asks him to read the letter to her, and asks him if he would do it. And then she also says that, "Now I would love it so much if you can read the letter to me." And then she says, We'll have some tea after you read the letter, and then I'll make you a Christmas cake with marzipan all around. And she remembers that he loves marzipan so much. It's not the narrator, but her husband who loved marzipan very much. And that's the end of the chapter. Who did Connie Macpherson think her visitor was? She thought that it was her husband. Which sentence in the text shows that the visitor did not try to hide his identity? Well, yeah, you can see that the visitor here says, if you go a little further, he would say that, Happy Christmas, Connie, I went on. I found this, I think it's yours, as I was speaking, right? So he's trying to tell her how he found it, and he said that it's yours. So that proves that the narrator was not trying to hide his identity at all. Why do you think the desk had been sold? And when? Well, the desk had been sold because it was a damaged piece of wood. It was burned and it was damaged by water. And it was sold when the house was not of Connie anymore. Connie was rescued from the fire and she was taken to the nursing home, and there was all the materials that were there inside the house were sold off, and it reached a junk shop. Why do Jim and Hans think that games or sports are good ways of resolving conflicts? Do you agree? Yes, Jim and Hans, they thought that games or sports are good ways of resolving conflicts because there is no loss of life, no loss of property, right? Nobody dies, no children becomes orphan, no women become widow. Yes, I completed it. I completely agree it. And you should also write down your point of view. Do you think the soldiers of the two armies are like each other or different from each other? Find evidence from the story to support your answer. They were like each other because all that they talked about, see, both the two armies, they wanted peace. Both the armies were ready to mingle with each other, become friends. And both the armies liked to play together. They sang Christmas carols. So in many ways, they were alike. And they were peace-loving people. They also loved their families. So this is how we know that they are alike. Mention the various ways in which the British and German soldiers become friends and find things in common at Christmas. Well, they shared they shared the schnapps and sausages. They eat the Hans and Jim Macpherson. They eat the leftover Christmas cake, which was baked by Connie. They play football match. They talk about their choice of reading books and their language. They appreciate their language and their cultures. And they played football together. They sang carols, right? So these are the evidences that shows that they were good friends. They had become good friends. And there were many things which are common. What is Connie's Christmas present? Why is it the best Christmas present in the world? So Connie's Christmas present was a letter which Jim had written to her in year 1915 from the war field. Of course, it was the best Christmas gift ever because this letter helped her restore all her memories about her long lost husband. And for a while, she was happy after such a long period of disappointment, distress, and loneliness. When she saw this letter, she remembered her husband, whom she always remembered actually, but she could actually believe that her husband was there with her. And she could imagine, she could believe that the narrator was her husband. Although it was not a truth, but it was a source of her happiness. It is the best Christmas present in the world because it could light up her life, uh, her sad life, her long sad life for once. Do you think the title of the story is suitable for it? Can you think of any other title? Yes, I think the title does justice to the story. And yes, there is a possibility of having another title, um, so which you can think of. Yeah. So this is all about it. We will do the grammar part soon. I'll be teaching you modals and past perfect tense pretty soon. All right. Signing off now. Please feel free to write any doubts or comments if you have at the comment box below. And the worksheet is attached with the video. After you go through this video, make sure that you attempt to do that worksheet. Thank you.